Who here likes drinking dirty water? I don't, and I hope all of you can agree with me when I say I would much rather drink clean water than dirty water. The same goes for the air I breathe. I'd much rather breathe clean air than dirty, filthy air. So why would you allow a dirty atmosphere, something that houses and protects all life on Earth? The dramatic increase in carbon dioxide released into our atmosphere within the last few hundred years has caused major things to happen to our environment. The carbon dioxide traps heat on a large scale, which leads to an increase in temperature around the world. That causes polar ice caps to melt and slowly shrink, which leads to an increased sea level and disruption of ecosystems. This increase in temperature also promotes wildfires, which release more carbon dioxide when burning. Yes, us as individuals can make sustainable choices to reduce our own carbon footprint, but only 100 companies around the world produce over 70% of carbon emissions. Now, the United States surpassed laws that fine companies for producing more than a predetermined amount of carbon dioxide. Rebecca Lindsay of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration stated in an article published August 14, 2020, carbon dioxide concentrations are rising mostly because of the fossil fuels that people are burning for energy. Fossil fuels like coal and oil contain carbon that plants pull out of the atmosphere through photosynthesis over the span of millions and millions of years. We are returning that carbon to the atmosphere in just a few hundred years. Carbon dioxide levels are rising at an alarming rate, and not because you drive to school every day, but because major corporations are using incomprehensible amount of fossil fuels on a daily basis to match their business quota. Now, I will go over the lack of carbon dioxide regulations on major corporations, the inherency of the problem, and what we can do to fix it. Now that I have brought up my topic, I will elaborate on the problem. The minimal supervision of huge companies across the United States in regard to carbon output leads to changes in the environment that affects hundreds of millions of people that live around the United States. Since 2010, the United States has dramatically increased its energy consumption using mainly fossil fuels. The sustained high rates of fossil fuels is what piles onto the ever-growing mountain of greenhouse gases. The lack of mainstream commercial use of renewable energy sources is what keeps us in the hole that we find ourselves in today. According to a graph published by the Pew Research Center on January 15, 2020, we have gone from using only a half a billion barrels of crude oil a year, that was back in 2010, to 1.1 billion barrels in 2019. That's over a 100% increase in oil usage in the span of 9 years. Although there has been a great increase in solar power production starting from 20 billion kilowatts in 2012, going all the way up to nearly 100 billion kilowatts per hour in 2019. The key to reducing and hopefully in the future removing carbon emissions is making a switch from primarily fossil fuels to primarily renewable energy sources like wind and solar energy. In an article posted by the United States Information Administration last updated May 6, 2020, they say in 2019, renewable energy sources accounted for about 11% of total U.S. energy consumption and about 17% of electricity generation. That's on average a mere 14% of energy being used by Americans coming from sustainable renewable sources. That means the other 86% of energy is coming from fossil fuels, which are adding more and more to the carbon dioxide problem that we have today. Today, we are living through the effects of the carbon emissions from the past, increases in global temperature, which lead to wildfires, the melting of polar ice caps, and flooding. Luckily, since 2007, we've had a slight reduction in our carbon dioxide emission in the United States. But to save future generations from the same thing we are facing, we must drastically limit our fossil fuel usage. This is not a problem that only a few are affected by. Even if this is not prominent in your day-to-day life, it is still an unavoidable problem that is yet to have a realistic solution. Now that I have brought up what the problem is, I will explain the inherency of it. There is an attitudinal inherency among some people of not believing global warming exists. Companies who don't believe in global warming are reluctant to switch to renewable energy because they don't think it achieves anything useful. Some people believe that greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide have no effect on the temperature of the Earth. Alan Buis of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory stated in an article posted on February 27, 2020, scientists are confident that Earth's recent warming is primarily due to human activity, specifically the direct input of carbon dioxide into Earth's atmosphere from burning fossil fuels. There are companies out there that continue to ignore the research of prestigious scientists from NASA and refuse to believe in global warming, all to make sure that they have cheap fuel to make their product. Many people believe that the reason for the rising of Earth's temperature is something called the Milankovitch cycle, which is the Earth's natural rise and fall of global climate, and not the burning of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are an affordable, reliable, and effective fuel source used to provide energy for factories and power plants. However, they are harmful for the environment. The alternative to fossil fuels would be using renewable energy sources like solar and wind. The only problem is that the other forms of energy are not yet as affordable as fossil fuels. Most companies specializing on these different types of energy are yet to be at an optimal price, which is very unattractive to companies who are trying to make a profit. Why would they pay more for the same amount of energy that they're receiving now? The other side of the issue is that global warming is not unanimously accepted as a theory. Many people don't even think that it exists. For instance, in an interview with Hugh Hewitt on September 21st, 2015, Donald Trump was asked, "Do you believe that the temperature of the Earth is increasing?" And he replied with, "First of all, I'm not a believer in global warming, and I'm not a believer in man-made global warming. It could be warming, and it could start to cool at some point, which is not that's not too good of a quote. The fact that a very wealthy and successful businessman like Donald Trump does not believe in global warming means that he's most likely not using renewable energy sources to power his businesses. It is the major corporations that are using the majority of power in the United States, and it's those corporations that are contributing the most to carbon emissions. While the Milankovitch cycle does increase Earth's temperatures, Alan Buick states in an article from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Milankovitch cycles operate on long time scales, ranging from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of years. In contrast, Earth's current warming has taken place over time scales of decades to centuries. It is impossible for the increase in warmth over the past 100 years to come from something that takes 10 to 100,000 years to fully come into effect. Framing the rise in temperature on the Milankovitch cycle is an uneducated excuse to deflect the blame from giant carbon-emitting corporations. Now, after talking about the inherency of the problem, I will now present a possible solution. Right now, we're in a very deep pit when it comes to carbon that we have already released into the atmosphere. But in order to reduce the amount of carbon that we pump into the air every year, we need big corporations to start transitioning to renewable energy sources along with other ways to reduce emissions. In April 2017, Christina Figueres, former United Nations climate chief, launched a global initiative called Mission 2020. In an article by Zeke Housefathers posted by Carbon Breathe on June 28, 2017, he states that the aim of Mission 2020 is to bring new urgency to global climate conversation with a call to begin rapidly declining greenhouse gas emissions by 2020. Mission 2020 plans to peak carbon emissions by 2020 and have them decline after that. An increase in electricity generation by renewable energy sources, raising the sales of electric powered vehicles, passing policies that limit deforestation, along with many other things. Successfully completing these will result in a significant drop of carbon emissions and will slowly get the temperature of the Earth back on track to where it is supposed to be. Obviously, these rapid changes from the norm of fossil fuels will come with some hesitation. Developing and perfecting renewable energy sources is a hard thing to do and it takes time and money. However, it is a necessary cost protecting and improving the thing that we all live on. Now, I presented you an effective way to reduce the carbon emissions. Now I will conclude my speech. The minimal supervision of huge companies across the United States in regards to carbon emission output leads to changes in the environment that affect the hundreds of millions of people that live in the United States. Some people and companies of today refuse to believe that global warming is a true problem. And we are in a very deep pit when it comes to carbon that we've already released into the atmosphere. But in order to reduce the amount of carbon that we pump into the air every year, we need big corporations to start transitioning to renewable energy sources. The United States should pass a law that fines companies for producing more carbon dioxide than a predetermined amount. And we only have one Earth, so why not keep it healthy for generations to come?